They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the second half of the show where we are going to be doing our very first ever health and wellness episode. So every Tuesday, we're going to be talking about health and wellness, and we're going to be exploring topics that we're not necessarily experts in. I'm actually a little bit nervous. I'm not going to lie. This is the first time I've been nervous doing a talk in a very long time because more often than not, we're talking about subject matters that we're quite familiar with. And Matt and I have made lots of YouTube videos. We've done lots of podcasts. We've delivered many talks to our various teams, employees, mentees, events. But we're often talking about real estate. We're talking about things that, we do every day. And this was certainly much more of an exploration and research for me. So once again, I'm a little bit nervous, and we are going to be talking about a subject matter that gets a little bit more technical. And so I certainly had to stretch my mind a little bit to unpack this, but I wanted to cover this subject matter because I think it's important. Malcolm Gladwell posited that it takes 10,000 hours to gain mastery of a subject or skill. And while there is some controversy to that statement, and certainly people have questioned that, I don't know if there's anything that I've actually spent 10,000 hours doing except sleep. So I think that that's why this subject matter is really important. You're going to sleep a lot of hours in your day and a lot of hours throughout your life. You're going to sleep about 229,000 hours if you live to the average age that we're expecting right now. So that's a lot of sleeping. But I think there's actually a huge difference between quantity, quality, and you can impact your sleep throughout a lot of the habits that you do on a daily basis. So Matt, why don't we get started by checking in with your sleep today? I know you mentioned on the first half of the show, you didn't have the best sleep.
Yeah. And so who knows? It could be for a multitude of reasons. I don't consume a lot of caffeine, but I did have 2 black teas yesterday, though I would have cut them off by, it would have been like 1-ish, I guess, my time. So technically I'm under that radar of what you had said. But going into October, I decided I would do a modified sober October and weekdays not smoke weed. And I've been like an everyday smoker for a long time, particularly in the nights, just like fall asleep like that. Whereas last night that did not happen, and I just like all of a sudden I remembered what like my sober thoughts were like, and it just like it's hard to turn off my brain, to be honest, at night.
Yeah, and that's actually something a lot of sleep doctors, sleep researchers say that people in your position often say, right? Is that, hey, I use alcohol in the evening, or perhaps stuff like marijuana, cannabis, CBD, in order to actually more quickly or more easily get to sleep. But we're going to actually talk a little bit later in the show about, while that may be true that you're slipping into unconsciousness faster or easier, it's not actually contributing to a better sleep or a higher quality of sleep. And there's a few reasons for that we'll unpack later in the show. But I did have a couple other questions for you, just to get a little bit of a benchmark, a little bit of discussion going here on what some of our daily habits are like at the top. And I'm sure, you watching at home right now, you're going to understand we're not perfect. We're also trying to get 1% better. And that's actually the purpose of this show, is so that we can get 1% better every single day with you guys in an attempt to have the best day ever and bring you guys along with us. So what's your exercise schedule like?
Very inconsistent.
Okay. So I would argue that I have a relatively consistent exercise schedule, and a lot of that has to do with just having the dog now. The dog needs to go on runs a couple times a day, or she will absolutely destroy everything I own. So that does force me outside and walking quite a bit, which actually has a few different benefits when we're talking about sleep. So I would say I probably get a little bit more daily activity than yourself. Caffeine, drugs, alcohol. You said you were a daily smoker. Is there anything else that you would use on like a daily basis? Like, I don't think you drink
No.
much alcohol.
No. So like yeah, that definitely is an impact in my sleep though. Like when I do to excess, like absolutely it impacts sleep. And same with like caffeine. Don't do a ton of it, but one thing that used to get me all the time back in the day when we were networking IRL is those like 7 p.m. networking events where they've got like tea outs and stuff like that, and I would drink tea. And um honestly, that's probably when I first actually like truly understood the feedback loop, because like those nights there was just no sleeping, right? Yeah, and then obviously, like every now and then, I like to dabble with Adderall, and that will completely nuke my sleeping pattern.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually didn't look into Adderall, but I could assume just from some of my research what Adderall may be doing and why it would affect your your quality of sleep. But I mean, I'm sure it's not promoting a great sleep. For myself, I would say I regularly enjoy probably 2 glasses of wine, maybe 2 glasses of wine per night. And that's kind of my regular schedule. I don't consume any marijuana, and I very seldom do any other type of drug like perhaps psilocybin, extremely rarely. But when I do, obviously you're not sleeping on that either. Screen time, Matt. How much time do you think you're spending every day on the screen?
How many hours are in a day?
Yeah. Okay. Same. So, obviously, screen time's a thing, and we're going to talk about that as well. How about your bedtime and rise time? What time do you go to sleep at night?
I'm not too bad with that. I'll essentially like kind of. And it's kind of weird because like I feel like I'm out of sync with time zones, because like everyone I deal with and interact with is EST and I'm an hour behind. But I'll start like winding down like 9, 10 o'clock my time. And that usually looks like me spending kind of like a hour on the couch with either a book or like my cell phone.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say I fairly consistently jump into bed around that 11 p.m. time. So I'm going to attempt to do that every night. And then I probably rise around 7. And at this point, it's a natural
Oh,
rise
yeah.
for me.
And 7 o'clock is like my time too. I technically set my alarm later, but I'm usually always up by 7.
Yeah, that's not a bad call either to have that safety net. There are actually some issues with oversleeping, so we can touch on that as well. Have you got any idea of the chemicals that are actually contributing
No,
to our wakefulness or our sleep? No?
no, absolutely not.
Okay. We're going to touch on that in this show as well, because some of those chemicals and some of the things that we've just talked about with our daily habits actually matter, and they are linked together. And I think it's worthwhile to explore some of those subject matters, because I believe it's going to help us to have the tools to better have quality sleep. So I think it's actually important. And then I guess a final question, honestly, how do you typically feel in the morning?
Again, because I'm naturally waking up actually good. So like I would
Okay.
say I feel good because again, like if the alarm clock's involved, right? Or if I've really like nuked my sleeping schedule, then obviously terrible. But on the average day to day, I actually feel solid in the morning, I would say. But part of me, like, I personally think that a lot of that's just like a personal decision. Like if I decide that like I'm gonna have a shitty morning, I absolutely have a shitty morning. And if I decide that no, like I just gotta get up because it's a thing, then it's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's perhaps even harder too, being that you or I don't necessarily need to get up at any specific time, right? As long as we're
Hmm.
making our earliest meetings, which typically aren't very early in the morning, there's not a huge driver. There's not a huge motivator. You don't need to be at the office at 8 a.m. or something like that. Would you say that your energy follows you throughout the day and into the afternoon, or do you find a slump during the afternoon?
Well, that's a good question. I don't really think too much about it. I don't think that I have too much of a slump. And part of me thinks that's because like intermittent fasting, where like I haven't eaten. So like if I eat early, then absolutely I feel like a huge slump.
Yeah, fascinating. What one other thing that you kind of touched on, but I think it's worth just, clearly defining this is that it sounds like you actually do feel a little bit of resistance in the evening when you're trying to go to sleep. Like you're getting lost in your thoughts.
Sure, but like that's literally like I'm lying in bed. I like to. This is something I picked up from a buddy years ago when we used to be like hungover in the morning, and he needed absolute darkness in order to sleep. He would like tie a t-shirt around his head, and so I literally do that. And like I'll just like last night, I was probably up for 2 or 3 hours unnecessarily just trying to fall asleep, and like it part of the time like I'll drift into like um oh, what do you call it? But like where I'm slightly conscious, slightly unconscious, like what's it something dreaming, right? Lucid dreaming. So like I'll be
Yep.
like quasi lucid dreaming, but I find that to be very low quality sleep when I'm doing it.
I actually frequently have lucid dreams where I'm able to control either the subject or the actual content of the dream, which is quite fascinating. And to be fair, for anybody watching, I did not dive into lucid dreaming. There's only so much a guy can do in terms of research for one program. But I do find lucid dreaming to be quite exciting. And then the final question I kind of have for you, and this is a little bit rhetorical, so I'm sorry for being dirty like that, but if you could wake up feeling better on a consistent daily basis, would you want to?
My honest answer, like straight up honest answer would be if it wasn't a lot of work. Like I
Okay.
don't know if I would honestly like if you're like you have to do like these 20 things in order to optimize your sleep and stuff. I know me, I'd probably just kind of shrug or I'd have good intentions and then fall off.
I'm going to give you a few simple tips. I think that would allow you to have not unmeaningful difference in your sleep. I mean, a serious, like meaningful difference in your sleep that would require almost no effort and probably fit your schedule very well. But I find there's a couple things that I just didn't know. And I think that that is perhaps one of the more exciting parts of this is that a lot of the things that these sleep experts discuss are not, they're really not unique, hard, novel things to do. It's more so a matter of knowing that it's out there and then tailoring and building and stacking some of your daily habits in order to fit a better version of living to have the best sleep. And we're going to talk about why that matters because there's honestly some really horrific outcomes if you don't sleep enough or if you don't have a high enough quality of sleep. So I just saw here in the comments, Matt, too. A lot of people are contributing to the fact that you wear a shirt. Okay, so there's people saying like, yeah, okay, we've got the eye mask in order to fall asleep. And Matt and I have actually done a fair bit of traveling together, and we typically get a hotel room together. So I've actually stolen Matt your t-shirt trick from your friend. So it's third generation now. I often sleep with the t-shirt as well because one of the things that happens, and I live in a relatively new subdivision. These new subdivisions have these street lights that are unbelievably bright. They are LEDs that they're, if you have seen Harry Potter, which I know Matt hasn't, but for all the other people out there, that scene where Dumbledore like puts all the light on the street or Hagrid does it. And it's just like unbelievably bright. That is what's going on in my neighborhood. And there's no possible curtain on the market that would allow you to get a true blackout experience. And so I often sleep with a t-shirt as well. So I don't think that's abnormal. But I'm going to bring up for you guys now my notes, and we're going to dive right into the meat and potatoes of this actual conversation and share with you some of the research that I turned up over the last few days, trying to just get a better understanding of how sleep actually works. What are we doing that is hindering or helping our sleep, and some of the consequences to doing that, as well as how to optimize for better sleep on a daily basis so that you feel better. I'm going to start sharing my screen here now. And what this actually is right here is a look at our Substack. So if you guys subscribe to our Substack, you're going to actually have instant access to all of our show notes. We have a lot of his show notes here. And like Matt already mentioned, I've got about 2,000 words here. And we're going to be jumping through all of this during this discussion. But I know some of you, if you're like me, you're potentially more of a a more visual learner. And so it might help you a little bit more to be reading through these notes rather than listening to them auditorily. And again, if you're listening to this right now on the road on one of our podcasts, you can go over to these Substack notes and watch the videos, click over and actually see the links that we're exploring here and listen to some of the experts that we're bringing up. So this is our Substack. And because I'm playing specific minutes here, specific times of these videos, feel free to watch the entire lengths of these. They're incredible. But for the purpose of the show, we're going to actually just listen to a smaller portion. And even before I get started, I realized that I've incorrectly shared this. And this is, again, part of the learning process because I know that audio was not about to share. So there we go. We've got audio. We're doing it before we make the mistake. First thing I want to bring up here is a video of Matthew Walker, who's a professor at, where the hell is he? He's somewhere in California. Anyways, he's a professor in California, and he's honestly one of the foremost experts, I would say, on sleep and the topic of how to get better sleep. He actually wrote a book called Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. And it is brilliant. I've heard excerpts of it. I've listened to a bunch of podcasts with him at this point, and we're going to be hearing a fair bit from him on this presentation. But for now, we're going to listen to him on Tom Bilyeu's show, Impact Theory, which is another fantastic show for you to learn about various subject matters. So here we go. Let's jump right into the video, and we're going to play till 2:25.
Out of acknowledgement of how much you talk about sleep and the neurological impact. And so I want to start with two things from the book that really blew my mind. And the first is that sleep is so important that the Guinness Book of World Records will not let people try to set records for sleep deprivation. Walk us through why not. I think this is a great entry to your world.
Yes. So what we know is that a lack of sleep will impact just about every major physiological system in your body and almost every operation of your mind. For example, if I were to take you and limit you to just 4 hours of sleep for one single night, there is almost a 70% drop in what we call natural killer cell activity, which are critical anti-cancer fighting immune cells. That's after one night of 4 hours of sleep.
That's crazy.
Secondly, if I were to short sleep you for just 1 week, your levels of testosterone would be that of someone 10 years your senior.
Define short sleep. How many hours are we talking?
So here we could be talking about 4 to 5 hours a night for 4 or 5 nights in a row, which if you look at the data on the survey, that's not unusual for perhaps even 20 to 30% of the population, certainly during the week. We also know from daylight savings time that it doesn't take very much, because there is a global experiment that's performed on about 1.6 billion people across 70 countries twice a year, and it's called daylight savings time. Now, in the spring, when we lose 1 hour of sleep, we see a 24% increase in heart attacks the following day. Yet in the autumn, in the fall, we see a 21% decrease in heart attacks. Now, you collide all of that in.
Okay, so what we just saw there, Matt, do you have any hot takes on some of the stats that he just spit out?
Well, now I just have a better reason to hate daylight savings time. So, like, yeah, I'm all about let's cancel that shit immediately. That's wild, though, to think that like a 20% swing both ways for that time change. And I guess like
1 hour of sleep.
Yeah, part of me wonders, though, like, if when you catch up on sleep, does that reset? Like when he's talking about, you know, that 4 hours of sleep and the increase in the cancer thing, are you so you're literally every single time you're like destroying yourself that you short sleep?
We're going to talk about that in some of the differences in the sleep cycles that we have, and they stack. So I'm going to explore that with us in the next paragraph, essentially. But the short answer is like, not really. So yes, your body does actually a really good job of getting rid of some of those chemicals that are cancer promoting. And it does a really good job of, regenerating cells and healing your body. But when we short ourselves on that sleep, it's very detrimental, and it's very quick to have long-lasting results. So, what he just said there is 1 night of 4 hours sleep is going to have a 70% reduction in cancer fighting ability in your body. That's one night with 4 hours sleep. If you do this all the time, you are seriously putting yourself in a massive jeopardized state. And then, the other stat that I thought was really interesting in that video is just the 25% increase in heart attacks with just a 1 hour time change. And that's people missing out on 1 hour or having 20% less heart attacks when they gain that hour back of sleep. So, yes, I'm all for canceling daylight savings times. I've never really understood why we do it to begin with. I don't really care when the sun's up. I just want to be sleeping in accordance to, the circadian rhythm, which is, again, something we need to really unpack here. But yeah, I thought that video was a decent illustration of, why it's even worth having this conversation, right? Like, why is sleep really important to having the best day ever? Well, yeah, it actually is. There's a lot of reasons why we need to talk about that. So I thought one of the best places to start when it comes to unpacking sleep is just to really understand what's actually going on when we're sleeping. What's happening in our brain, right? How is it that we sleep? And Matthew Walker, if you digest a lot of his content, he makes a really exciting point about sleep itself and why it's such a ridiculous thing to do. If we think back, hundreds of thousands of years that we've been on the planet and look at any other animal species, millions of years, almost all animals sleep. Okay. But sleep is one of these really weird things where on the surface, it's really hard to understand why it would be advantageous. And it's really, really, really difficult to understand why we would evolve to do it in the first place. When we're sleeping, we're pathetically vulnerable. Okay. You're not moving away from predators. You're completely vulnerable from almost every angle. We're pretty bad at smelling when we're sleeping. We're honestly a lot of us are not very alert to sound when we're sleeping. And like literally anything can kill you when you're in your sleep. You're defenseless. So it doesn't seem obvious why we would do it. But there's a lot of things going on during our sleep that are actually really essential to our bodies staying healthy and being able to recover. So the easiest place to start in this huge topic, I thought, was to kind of look at what sleep phases there are. So to get an idea of what sleep phases there are, I think it helps to just kind of look at this graphic and get an understanding of just kind of what's going on. So my research really turned up that there's essentially two phases. Okay, there's basically just non-REM sleep and REM sleep. Okay. And everybody kind of understands that REM sleep is where we're dreaming. And I think that that's a fairly popular word. Everybody will have heard that before. But I don't really think that everybody has heard of these different states of non-REM sleep, which would be N1, N2, and N3 and 4. Which are sometimes combined. It depends what study you're reading. I read a lot of research to get this done. All my research and citations are at the bottom of this Substack article that we've sent out. But the best place to start here is kind of that awake, that light sleep. So we spend about 2 to 5% of our time in this light sleep stage, which is that's kind of the awake. So some people break this into different categories, but we sort of, when we lay down, our brain waves start slowing down and we start actually going into a different state of being, really. And this sort of awakes a period where our body's coming to terms that it needs to slow its heart rate down. It needs to begin cooling down for us to sleep and entering this different stage of brain wave patterns. So anyways, N1 is kind of the awake light sleep. N2 is a deeper sleep, and N3 is sort of the deepest sleep. And you'll see that we spend actually a fair amount of time in the kind of N1, N2 kind of period, which is 45 to 55% of our sleep, 13 to 23% in deep sleep. And we spend only about a quarter of our time sleeping in rapid eye movement, which is the REM sleep. So I thought this infographic here was a really good place to start. I'm just going to maximize my screen a little bit so you guys can see this better. And I think to really understand what's happening here, we need to just sort of define what's going on in the various stages. And then we can talk about later a little bit more about why they're so important and what can happen if you skip some of these things. So N1, falling asleep. This is where your heartbeat, breathing slow down. Okay, your muscles begin to relax, and sometimes people, this is where, like, when you're laying down in bed, you start getting that twitch, where it kind of feels like you're falling, or, you almost feel like moving. And that's something that's also very unique as we get into a deeper sleep with N3, that our brain stem does for us, where it essentially paralyzes our body from our dreaming actions, which is really quite unique, that happens. So stage 2, yep.
Quick thing, just on the Twitch thing. Oh,
Yeah.
there's weird echo. But on the Twitch thing, is that normal? Is that like a okay thing? Because I almost have that every single night.
Yeah, the Twitch thing's totally normal, man. Although I don't think every night would be the case for everybody, but it certainly is a normal phenomenon. This is your body essentially slipping down into a deeper state of sleep. And when this is happening, your brain waves, which we're going to talk about next, are actually changing wavelengths. It's really crazy. I'm going to show you guys an infographic on that. It's kind of, to me, I was blown away at like how dynamic our brain actually is. And I think it's quite unique. So as we're going from that falling asleep stage into light sleep, our heartbeat further slows. And one of the reasons that needs to occur is our bodies actually need to drop about 1 to 3 degrees for us to fall asleep. And so in order to do that, we need a slower heartbeat, we need a lower blood pressure, we need to be very relaxed. And when you think about 1 to 3 degrees, like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but as a core temperature, that's actually a very big difference in your body's temperature. So temperature is one of the main contributing factors to whether or not you're going to, first of all, fall asleep, and second of all, stay asleep and have a high quality sleep. So big important part of this. The next thing here is your brain produces sleep spindles, which we're going to unpack in a moment. But this is also a very important part of the process to falling asleep, and some of the things that we were talking about before with our daily habits. And this stage lasts, 25 minutes. It's relatively long in the cycle because we sleep in 90-minute cycles. And you actually go through essentially all of these stages every 90 minutes. And when we're children, we essentially have a lot of REM sleep. And then as we get older, you have a lot more diminishing returns on REM sleep. So you get a lot less REM sleep the older you get. And there's some things there's issues with some things around that. And we'll unpack that too. So stage 3, the slow wave sleep. This is actually arguably one of the most important states of sleep next to REM sleep. So slow wave sleep is essentially when your heartbeat and breathing are at its slowest rate. There's no eye movement. Your body is fully relaxed. And in fact, a lot of your autonomic systems are running. Okay. So, we're breathing. Our heart rate is obviously working. Our blood pressure is still being regulated by the body, but we're not able to act out a lot of the things that, like, the sympathetic system wants to do, like moving your actual limbs, right? In this state, we're probably still. Okay. So you're on your side, you're on your back, you're on your stomach. And we're certainly not doing things like, acting out the cliff dive that you just did in your dream. And that's very important because humans have slept in all sorts of places, including, I'm sure, on cliffs, beside cliffs, in trees, at the mouths of caves that are perhaps in dangerous positions. It's really important that we evolve to not move in accordance to what our brain is living out in its dreams. And so this state is very important in order to transition into REM sleep, because it's at this point we become paralyzed to that movement. This is also the stage in which, and this infographic, I would argue, is honestly a little bit elementary in terms of what is actually happening in N3. N3 is probably not as important for some of the reasons this infographic says, but it is true that on an elementary surface level, this is where most of your tissue repair, cell regeneration, and growth occurs. Okay. So if you have, damaged muscles, right? Perhaps you've sprained something, you've been running, you've been doing resistance training, so you're building additional muscle. This is where it's going to happen. Okay. So think of anything physical. Typically, the physical stuff is happening in N3, which is deep sleep, which again is almost at the end of the cycle. And we're not spending a lot of time actually in that state. So it's really important that we get to that state as soon as we can and that we get the maximum benefits from it, because that is where your cell regeneration is and where some of the hormones are being released. This is also where your immune system is going to get a huge boost. So a lot of people would be very familiar with the idea that when you're sick, you feel like sleeping all the time, right? You're kind of, you would prefer to be in bed than out and about doing things. And there's a huge reason for that. And that is just evolutionary process. We have evolved to understand through our brain and the various chemicals that this sleep, this slow wave sleep, is where we can actually rehabilitate ourselves. And it's honestly like we have an entire hospital going on in our bodies working for us to keep all of our cells doing what they should be doing and repair all those things that are hurt by things like viruses and any type of like infections and things that we run into on a daily basis. So N3, the easiest way to think about it, and again, it's kind of elementary to say this, but the best way to think about N3 is, and your deep sleep, is repairing the physical body. Now, N3 transitions us into REM sleep. Okay, so REM sleep, I would say, is as or more important as the deep sleep stage. And the reason for this is we begin dreaming. Okay, so dreaming is a really weird thing. It's not super well understood as I researched it, but there are a lot of things that can be said about this state of our brain. So obviously we have the rapid eye movements. That's what it's called, is REM sleep. Our breathing and heart rates increase dramatically. So they kind of cycle from like these really hard, heavy blips of like high heart rates and high blood pressure, and then they drop almost randomly to low blood pressure, low heart rate, and it's pretty sporadic actually. So your limbs and muscles at this point are fully paralyzed. Your brainstem has done all that work for you and made sure that you can't fly off cliffs or anything like that. And your brain activity is actually nearly indistinguishable from your waking state. Now, one thing that Matthew Walker brought up that I thought was really fascinating about this state is that he actually, oh, hello, Adam. He actually discusses at this stage that your brain does something that has not been ever seen in any other circumstance other than when you're dreaming. And the circumstance he's talking about is your entire cortex lights up. So if you're measuring brain activity with an electro measurement thing, an EEG, your entire cortex lights up at once, all at the same time, and it looks like a Christmas tree, and then it completely turns back off. So your brain almost looks like it's breathing when you're sleeping and dreaming. So it lights up everything all at once, which is something that never happens. It doesn't happen when you're awake. It doesn't happen in animals doing anything else. It only happens when you're dreaming. Your entire brain lights up at once and then shuts back off and then lights back up as if it was breathing. And man, that's freaky and super cool. So it is literally one of the only times where all of our neurons are working together to simultaneously communicate. And that happens in no other circumstance in nature. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, it's just wild. Here is an image that I thought was very interesting to look at. So I think, sorry, I'm kind of blocking the bottom thing on our screen, but I'm going to go through this. So gamma waves. So gamma waves are essentially the wavelengths and the frequency that our brain emits when we're problem solving or concentrating. So right now, I'm concentrating fairly hard on not screwing up this talk. I'm probably using a lot of gamma rays or emitting a lot of gamma rays. I think rays are probably the wrong word. It's waves. See, there I go. Problem solving, concentrating. I will also have a blend of beta waves going on right now as well. because my mind's very active, I'm thinking about the stream. I'm thinking about the fact that Rumble's not streaming right now. I'm thinking about, what does Matt think about this talk? I'm thinking about, what do you at home or in your car right now think about this talk? So my brain is going to have multiple waves going all at the same time. And the reason why that's even important to bring up is because deep sleep, N3, is a state in which all of that shuts off. Okay. Our brain slows down. It goes through this transition. And I think a beautiful analogy to getting to sleep, having quality sleep, and then staying in sleep is not like a switch where we lay down and our lights shut off, but more like landing a plane where there's all these processes and we need to slow down. And eventually we come to this very slow movement on the runway, which is the delta brainwaves. And those brainwaves are essentially us just, it's really cool. It's like our brain and body shut down and just really slow down to a factor of about 1/10 of the brain waves and activity, so that we can actually heal our bodies. And what this is doing is taking a lot of resources from the rest of our body. So imagine there's a finite amount of resources available to your body at any given point. Well, when your body needs to repair itself, it's going to take away a bunch of resources in order to do that. And so this is that state, which I found really cool. I don't know. I thought this was an epic illustration of the different type of brainwave. So right now I'm in that kind of gamma beta stage. And when I'm sleeping, I'm going to slow everything down so that my body has the resources to do that. One of the interesting things to reflect on, and I'm just going to switch back to just a view of Matt and I and continue the talk here. If you guys want to follow along with these show notes, just remember they're on Substack, guys. So N3, this is the deepest stage of sleep, like I mentioned, right before you start dreaming. Well, those delta waves, it's really cool what's actually happening when those delta waves are happening, because what it's actually doing, it's really crazy. Our tissue starts to repair and grow, and it allows for cellular regeneration. But what's also happening at the same time is this activation of what's called the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system is going to it essentially allows the cells to shrink from our brain, and it acts as like a sewage system, which is really cool. So when the glymphatic system is activated, cerebral spinal fluid is allowed to pulse in and out of the brain. And that's very important, because what's coming in and out of the brain is this stuff called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid is this protein that's been associated with things like Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and all sorts of miserable health conditions and diseases that have to do with our memory and cognitive function. And so it's extremely important that we enter this stage of deep sleep and stay there uninterrupted. And some of the consequences to this, we're going to touch on just next, but it's important to understand that, like, we need to stay uninterrupted in these states, and we can even see when we don't. So, like, I'm sure, Matt, you've been awoken out of a deep sleep before, and you just feel like absolute hell. Like, your brain's not on. You feel groggy. You feel slow. You don't feel like your brain's quite working that well. That phenomenon is actually called sleep inertia. And sleep inertia is real. And actually, it happens even if you wake up naturally. So essentially, for the first hour of the day, after you wake up, your body's still kind of in sleep inertia. It's running through these processes and trying to boot up the system so that it can turn off some of these different systems like the glymphatic system in order to get you to a full state of alertness and wakefulness. And it's important to let our bodies cycle through that, because, again, if we don't allow our bodies to get rid of some of this beta amyloid and some of these proteins and waste that's occurring, and it's natural, it's all natural in our bodies, it's very difficult for us to avoid some of the obvious pitfalls that are like age. They're basically like aging. So when you're not sleeping properly, you're essentially aging your body, whether that's in principle or practice. So, that one night where you're sleeping that 4 hours, probably the profile of your body the next day in terms of hormones is going to look like you have just aged 10 years. And that's, got consequences. And most of those consequences are not going to be great. So that takes us into the stage of the talk, which is, is it more important to sleep longer Or is it more important to have a higher quality sleep, right? And so there's a couple different natural questions you could start thinking about when you start thinking about this. Like, one of the natural questions is like, well, if I only could sleep 4 hours, should I sleep the first 4 hours of my sleep and then wake up early? Or should I stay up as late as I can and then sleep the last 4 hours? Right. And I think a lot of us will have uh, been in this situation practically. So think about my university days, right? Thinking about cramming for the test, you're going to stay up late and then get up early, or get up at your normal time, but you just stayed up. Here's the deal. It's really dangerous because our body moving through those cycles, and why it was so important to unpack the phases of sleep. So our body must go through all the stages. Okay. So what ends up happening is your brain is going to cycle you through N1, N2, N3, N4, and REM. And it doesn't care that you missed the 4 hours before. And so what does that actually mean? Well, it means that your body is it's essentially going to, following its own circadian clock, understand that you missed 4 hours at the start. So it's going to try and rush everything in. And then what ends up happening is, so the first half of your sleep, the easiest way to look at this, first half is kind of your deep sleep, which is repairing your physical body. Second half is repairing all of your emotional centers. So that's kind of what REM does. It's sort of the psychologist for yourself. It repairs your emotions. It repairs your mental state for the next day. And what ends up happening here is if you rush through it, your body is not going to spend the time it needs on cellular regeneration, on preparing your muscles, preparing everything else that you need physically for the next day. And what that ends up doing is having a cascading effect on your mental state. And on the same, other side of the same coin, if you wake up before you finish some of your REM cycles, you are more likely going to have agitations. You are more likely to be emotionally unstable. You are more likely to have a lack in critical thinking. There's a lot of reasons why we need to go through these cycles and why we shouldn't sacrifice the full term of sleep, which for the average adult needs to be about 7 to 9 hours. So here's some telltale signs of if you're getting a poor sleep. And I think a lot of you will be aware of some of these signs. And I'm just going to pull up my screen again because it'll be easy for you guys to follow around if you can't keep track of what I'm saying. But some telltale signs that you're actually not getting a quality sleep would be that you take more than 30 minutes to fall asleep after you get into bed. Okay. Or you wake up more than once per night. Okay. It's actually very normal to wake up once per night and go to the bathroom. That's something that naturally occurs. And in fact, as we get older, because we spend less time in REM sleep, we spend more time in the deep sleep phase. And when we're transitioning between those two different things, sometimes we move our bodies, right? Like between REM states and so between going from REM sleep into a lighter sleep, often that's when you're kind of waking up, right? You're going to wake up, roll over, fix your position. Maybe you're on your back. You're going to move to your side. And most of these things aren't logged into our memory, but we do occasionally get up to go to the bathroom or something. That happens a lot. It's perfectly normal if you're getting up to go to the bathroom and then you go back to sleep and you fall asleep right away. But if you're staying awake for more than 20 minutes here and you're in the middle of the night, that's an indication you've got bad daily habits that you can start working on. 85% of your time in bed is sleep. So again, like if you're perhaps in a situation like Matt's where you're laying down and you're staying awake for a long period of time because you're lost in your thoughts or you're daydreaming, whatever that may be, that's an indication that there are some habits you can improve on. If you feel difficulty concentrating during the day, if you're, your skin's breaking out, if you feel hungry more often, and especially for junk food, if you're feeling stressed, emotionally exhausted, angrier than usual, this is definitely an indication that you have habits that are affecting your sleep. I threw in here, if you've been diagnosed with insomnia, that's kind of a gimme. Sorry, guys, I need my word count up. But that is a gimme. But conversely, there are some signals that you're getting a high quality of sleep. Okay. So when you lay down and you're falling asleep within 30 minutes, that is an indication that you've been sleeping properly. If you fall asleep and you sleep through the entire night and you don't wake up to go to the bathroom more than, once or arguably twice, that's an indication you're getting a great level of sleep. Maybe your habits or what you're doing now are working well for you. If you're able to sleep the full 7 to 9 hours, that's a great indication that you're actually getting the right habits in order to keep you sleeping. And again, if you lay back down and you fall asleep right away, that's a great indication that you're actually getting a lot of sleep. Now, I wanted to draw our attention to a glaring and obvious problem that seems to be permeating, the culture at the very least in the first world and in North America. And this particular study is just talking about the United States. So when we're talking about sleep quality and we're talking about the idea that it's so important for all these different reasons, fighting off disease, cellular regeneration, your mental state during the day, including focus, acuity, emotional intelligence, all of these things are related to sleep. But here's one of the problems that we're seeing right now is that 35%, and this is reported by the CDC, 35% of US adults are not getting the recommended sleep each night. Okay. So they're sleeping less than they should be. And just to give you an approximate amount of, how many people is 35% of the US? Well, it's roughly 116 million people in the US alone that are not getting a recommended 7 hours of sleep per night. Well, that's a little bit scary, isn't it? When we consider that this is going to actually have a huge contribution in their mood, their memory, their decision-making, their judgment, their ability to learn new things, their reflexes. Matt, can you think of some reasons why it might be an issue if people's moods, memory, decision-making, judgment, ability to learn new things, and reflexes are impaired on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think there's some pretty obvious consequences there.
Okay, this is your bus driver. This is your pilot. This is the guy driving beside you on the freeway. This is, the guy operating the crane above you as you're walking downtown.
Well, I think for some of us, even, I would imagine the majority of us that have done highway driving, right? Like you've probably followed or been followed by someone, or maybe you've been the driver yourself and you've noticed their lack of reaction time, their dozing off, all those sort of scary things.
Yeah, and of course, this is compounded as well by some of the technological distractions that we have, like our cell phones. So it all matters. It systemically matters. And, it doesn't stop there. So I want to share with you as well some of the health issues and health risks associated with the lack of sleep. These include heart attacks, cancer, damage to DNA, obesity, stroke, diabetes, depression, immune system damage. And, those things alone, as Matt Walker shared in the first video clip that we played for you guys, this can all occur with just a 4-hour lack of sleep. Of course, if you have a night where you sleep only 4 hours, you're not immediately going to get cancer. But what he's saying is if you systemically have these issues or habitually have this issue where you're not actually getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep on average, you are at much greater risk of having the issues like cancers, heart attack, damage to your DNA, obesity, stroke, diabetes, and depression. And that's not good. The other thing is the immune system damage, right? We saw over the last couple of years with things like COVID, how important it was to have a strong immune system. Sleep is a major contributor to whether or not your immune system's working. I wanted to play a clip here from Joe Rogan's podcast. So I'm going to just bring that up for you guys as well. It's Matt Walker on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I'm hoping it's not redundant now, but I'm pulling it up. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Share.
Would not condone that sort of, undergoing sleep just based on the mortality and, risk of Alzheimer's and cancer by itself. You just don't want to undersleep.
Even in short doses, like if a couple days a week, like here's if sleep is not a renewable resource, like what is the effect of, say, if you have 3 nights a week where you sleep 8 hours and then the next night 2 hours and then the next night 8 hours, how much of a bump or how much of a dip does that 2 hours give you in your overall health?
It's bad.
It's bad.
So I'll give you two examples. There was a study where they just took individuals and they just gave them 4 hours of sleep for one night. And what they saw was a 70% reduction in critical anti-cancer fighting immune cells called natural killer cells. These are wonderful immune assassins that target malignant cells. So today, both you and I have produced cancer cells in our body. What prevents those cancer cells from becoming the disease that we call cancer is in part these natural killer cells. And after one night of 4 hours of sleep, that is a remarkable state of immune deficiency. And that's one of the reasons why insufficient sleep predicts cancer. Wow. I could also speak about your cardiovascular system, though, and all it takes is 1 hour.
Okay. So like he's being very serious, and this is him parading on like every major podcast in the United States of America. And his message is literally the same, that 4 hours of sleep is detrimental. 1 hour of sleep is also detrimental. And that's okay. Okay. Cause there's habits, there's things that we can do to improve that situation. Matt, the questions I asked you at the start of the stream about what were some of our daily habits and kind of the discussion we had, right? It sounds like both of us are, consuming some drugs of some sort. So, you're having some marijuana. I'm having some alcohol. We're both occasionally having caffeine. It sounds like we have regularly routine sleep schedules, which is pretty good. I would say for people that, don't even necessarily have that like job to wake up to go to, I think we're on pace there for having good habits. But there's a few other things that I bet we both haven't considered. So I want to talk now about why your habits matter and what some of the positive habits you can do to improve your sleep are. So one of the first things that is brought up by all the sleep experts that I could find on the internet was this need for adequate lighting in the morning. So, Matt, have you heard about this? Like, have you heard about light viewing?
No.
No? Okay, so legitimately one of the simplest things, and I told you this wasn't going to be hard for you, one of the best things that you could do for yourself is to expose yourself to 5 minutes of direct sunlight in the morning. But there's a caveat. And this is something that I really didn't understand. You need to view it through your eyeballs. Okay. And this sounds strange, but there's all of these systems in your brain that essentially take in light waves and interpret what time of the day it is. And because we've evolved for literally millions of years, our brains understand the difference between morning sun, essentially the position of the sun in the sky, as well as the wavelengths of the color that the sun is producing in the morning and in the evening. So we have this internal clock, and this internal clock essentially is running, and a lot of us just refer to it as a circadian rhythm. And that's essentially just what's the sun doing. So one of the most important things that we could possibly do to improve our habits in the morning is to wake up and immediately put sun in our eyeballs. It's not enough to have it on your skin. And the reason for that is because when it goes through your eyes, so literally you want to be looking at the sun in the morning, you can blink, you can do all those things. No glass, no sunglasses. Okay, so that drive to work in the morning in the car through the windshield, it doesn't count. Okay, it's not as good. The viewing the sun through sunglasses, not as good. You're going to filter out some of these light rays. So our eyeballs are directly communicating to our brains what time it is when we wake up and we view the sun through them. And I thought that was profound, but it literally has a remarkable difference in your quality of wakefulness, in like your ability to think, your ability to problem solve, your level of focus during the day, the duration of how long you're going to be awake and alert is massively increased if you view the sun in the morning. Okay, so first thing you do when you wake up, go get some light in your eyes. The sun, you need it. Now, if you're in a place like, say, Britain or England, where it's just never sunny, you're going to need a lot of this. So even on a cloudy day, our brains understand that the sun is up, and we can look at the sun for about half an hour to actually do that. Seems impractical, but that's what you got to do if you're going to live where it rains every day. For us, though, we can watch the sunrise. 5 minutes is good enough to have an exponential increase in alertness and wakefulness throughout the day. Okay, so that is going to help set the clock. And then in the evening, the same thing happens. In the evening, you should go light viewing with your eyes when the sun's not in the top of the sky, not when it's, in the midday, but in the evening when it's setting. There's a different spectrum of light that comes through your eyeballs when you're viewing a setting sun. That tells your brain, hey, the sun's setting. It's time to start producing things like melatonin. It's time to start producing those hormones that are going to actually put us to sleep. Okay. One thing that we do very poorly is unnatural light. Okay. So, and it's actually all spectrum. So a lot of people will say, oh, I got my blue glasses. I'm good to go. I got my blue blockers. It's actually not as effective as you think. And all unnatural light sources that are bright are tricking your body to essentially delay its reaction to a chemical that builds up in our brain called adenosine. Okay. So adenosine is this really cool thing that we have to talk about when we're talking about some of the drugs that you and I have been doing. So adenosine is essentially the waste product of our brain consuming energy. Okay, so as your brain consumes energy, it puts out, almost like a car puts out carbon dioxide, it puts out adenosine into your brain. So as adenosine is being produced throughout the day as this waste product of your brain actually just working and doing its normal thing, it is going to indicate to your body that you're getting tired. So the reason why you're wakeful in the morning is because your brain has dumped all the adenosine. The reason why you get tired throughout the day is because you've got this buildup, this almost pressure of adenosine building up in your brain. Things that really mess with adenosine, caffeine, alcohol, right? Drugs. So adenosine is good. It's perfectly natural. What we're doing when we look at the light in the morning is we're pushing off that adenosine a little bit further into the evening for when we're supposed to be naturally starting to recognize that buildup of adenosine and getting tired. So when we wake up, we need to get the sun in our eyes. And then caffeine. This is a really big tip that can help everybody that's watching this have more wakefulness and have a more alert day during the day and then get to sleep better. You have to avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. And the reason for that is it's an adenosine antagonist. And so essentially what it does is it replaces the space in the adenosine receptor that would allow the adenosine to be recognized. So it doesn't remove the adenosine. It just essentially tricks your body into thinking it doesn't have as much adenosine right now build up as it actually does. And that's why we experience that caffeine crash. So if you're waking up and drinking caffeine right in the morning, you are essentially delaying an essential process of your body understanding the actual time of day that it is and recognizing its own circadian rhythm. And that is going to lead you to crash. And what ends up happening is this vicious circle. You crash, so you drink more caffeine to pick yourself back up. That then delays the adenosine process further, which promotes a dump in the evening. But it will interfere as well with your sleep state. So drugs, alcohol, caffeine, these things are going to very severely promote they're going to very severely prevent you from getting into the proper stage of sleep for the right amount of duration that you need to be in to actually get the benefits of deep sleep and REM sleep. Okay. So you will fully recognize this, Matt. When you stop smoking weed, you start having vivid dreams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a response to your body not being able to get that full deep sleep, and then it's rushing through and trying to make up for lost REM sleep. So when you are smoking weed and you don't have that REM sleep, you're actually robbing yourself of mental acuity, emotional stability, emotional intelligence, and all these different things that could be improved had you improved that habit. Eating large meals. Okay. When you eat a large meal, this diverts blood away from your brain and from the other organs and systems that are supposed to be running you through your sleep systems. So it's very important to not eat large meals right before bed. It's going to completely reorganize how your body is consuming its energy and what systems are operating when you should be sleeping. Bad practice. Do not eat large meals right before bed. Exercise. Exercise is an incredible way to tell your body what the circadian clock should be. Morning exercise has proved to be the most effective way to get great sleep in the evening. So I think that's something that is an actionable item that anybody viewing this could start doing, is even switching your body around from eating in the evening where you're consuming a large meal that then forces your body to run through various systems and processes that aren't conducive to great deep sleep. And exercising in the evening also has the same effect. The same thing goes for drugs, alcohol. Okay. If you're smoking weed right before you go to sleep, your brain is not going to properly run through the systems and processes it needs to engage some of these systems, like the glymphatic system. It's just not going to work for you. A couple other things that you really want to be aware of is autonomic timing. So with autonomic timing, this is essentially like your body knows its schedule, and your brain kind of intuits what systems to run and when. And so it's actually really important to wake up at the same time every day. It's just as important to go to bed at the same time every day. It's really beneficial as well to time your exercise, your food, your caffeine intake, and everything else that's in your control to the same time every day. If you do that, your brain will actually recognize the patterns that you're going through, and it just automatically runs these systems for you. So I think, Matt, for our takeaways, because I think we're getting close to the end of the show here, for some of the takeaways and actionable items of how you could just start sleeping better and waking up better and having more energy throughout the day, and arguably extending the longevity of your life through having less disease, less immune issues, and less issues with like heart attack, stroke, and those things that are potentially going to kill you, it's pretty simple. You go to bed at the same time, you wake up at the same time, you limit your caffeine and drugs to before like at least 7-8 hours before you're about to sleep. And then when you first wake up, it's really important to get light in your eyeballs. And it's equally as important to get light in your eyeballs in the evening. So if you can wake up, at the same time every morning. One of the things I actually forgot to mention, this is another hack, but it's maybe not going to be easy for people. So I wouldn't blame you if you didn't do it. Cold temperatures. Okay. Cold shower. It's really interesting. Cold showers have I don't know how to say this. It's not what you think. So a cold shower is not lowering your body temperature, which would actually not be what you want. So in order to wake your body up and get out of your final sleep, your body actually needs to warm up 1 to 3 degrees Celsius. And that is going to bring you up and out of the sleep that you were in. And so in order to maximize your alertness during the day, you actually want to raise your core temperature early. And you can do that basically only 2 ways. One way is exercise. So like get some cardiovascular exercise. The second way, it's a hack, is a cold shower for 1 to 3 minutes. If you go longer than the 1 to 3 minutes, you're at risk of actually dropping your core temperature. But going 1 to 3 minutes with cold shower will actually it will force your body to raise its internal temperature, because your body thinks, oh, it's cold, I should get warmer. And that will increase your alertness throughout the day. So those are some tricks and tips that you can do. Wake up, get sun in your eyes, move your body, potentially do something to increase your core temperature right in the morning. Delay your caffeine consumption or any other drug for at least 120 minutes in the morning to allow the adenosine to properly begin its phase, and for all your other systems to shut down throughout that sleep inertia. Then you want to time your meals so that you're not eating large meals in the evening. And you want to get off your phones, get off your bright lights and screens well before you go to sleep. I'm talking at least a couple hours at least. And then in the evening, just try and get in some light viewing through your eyeballs without interference from windows or sunglasses or anything like that. And then go to bed at the same time. That is it. And that literally can have all those benefits of reducing strokes, heart attacks, disease, DNA damage, all the obvious things throughout the day, like mental fatigue, right? Fogginess, not having mental clarity, potentially car accidents. I mean, this has real impacts. So yeah, I mean, guy, that's what I have on sleep. That's what I learned in sleep over a few days. And I hope that was informative for you guys. And Matt, did you have any hot takes or anything that was surprising here?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the thoroughness there, Adam. And I think, honestly, probably a lot of us have heard bits and pieces of the stuff you kind of said, but oftentimes without it being anchored to like a more formal understanding of the potential consequences of some of those decisions we make. I think it can be really easy to be like, oh, I probably should try and go to bed at the same time, but what are you going to do? Lots of people don't. And I probably should try and wake up at the same time, but what you going to do? A lot of people don't. I should try and cut out caffeine earlier in the day, but my coworkers drink until 4 p.m. So like, why should I not? And yeah, I just really appreciate it. I think that, sleep is obviously a very important factor when it comes to every individual's health, and to explore it further is great.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stuck out to me so glaringly was the cultural kind of rift between these findings and what we do, right? Here's something for you. We're all about to go into Thanksgiving, all right? And I'm sure this is evergreen content, so we're recording this in October, okay? It's about to be Thanksgiving here in Canada. We are all about to embark on a major feast of large meals before we sleep, probably over consuming alcohol, probably having caffeine or at least alcohol, aperitivos, right? Beverages after dinner. We're all about to go eat a bunch of crazy food, which is something I didn't want to dive into that, but what you eat also matters almost as much as when you eat it. So, we're about to eat gravy and sugar and alcohol. And perhaps because you're drinking, you have an evening cigarette or a cigar. And all of these things are going to cascade into these big issues. And culturally, that is what we do. In fact, it's celebrated, right? I can think of a lot of our business meetings where, it wouldn't be abnormal to have cocktails into after midnight. And so these things are not helping us. And I guess just to kind of top this off, I wanted to share just one little graphic here from Andrew Huberman, who, by the way, if you want to continue your research, if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, check Matt Walker out. Check out Huberman Lab podcast. And this podcast is fantastic. He talks about a lot more than just sleep, but this guy's really brilliant. And to kind of, put the bow on this thing, here's a tweet from Andrew Huberman, who is a PhD. The best nootropic, sleep. The best stress relief, sleep. The best trauma release, sleep. The best immune booster, sleep. The best hormone augmentation, sleep. I honestly forgot to bring up the hormones. Growth hormone, testosterone, all those things that you need to be a high functioning person are all produced when you're going to sleep. Okay. And that's sort of something I forgot to mention during REM sleep is REM, which was not traditionally thought of as being so important for your hormones, is incredibly important, as they're finding out today with new research. So you need to get into that dream state. Drugs, alcohol, caffeine are all preventing that. So skip it.
I guess one of our big takeaways here, Adam, is if you're going to drink day drunk.
So it's funny. They actually mentioned this. Yes, it honestly would be better, but it still has downstream effects because of the half-life of caffeine or alcohol and THC as well. They do have half-lives of like 12 hours. So there's still issues with that, right? So and then finally on this infographic here, the best emotional stabilizer, sleep. So I believe having a high quality sleep, improving some of your habits, getting 1% better every day is one of the ways that we can live our best day ever. And that's going to help us improve our business relationships, our personal and romantic relationships, as well as just our quality of life. I mean, if you can do some of these basic things that I said, and they don't seem hard. And in fact, I've been experimenting with these things the last few days. I feel YouTube's going to demonetize us. I feel fucking incredible. And I think it's worth feeling incredible, right? And sometimes maybe that does require some sacrifice. It's worth it. So I'm really happy if you're watching this, you've stuck through the first of, many episodes where we're going to do deep dives into things that we didn't really know a ton about before we got started. So I'm really excited to be here learning with you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this talk on sleep.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Adam. And reminder, guys, notes and links and everything is in the Substack article. So that's the best place to go if you'd like to do a deeper dive when it comes to sleep.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for today's show, Matt, and I'm going to play us out. Please go and subscribe, like, share the thing. I'd love to get more people on the path to having the best day ever. And that's ultimately what we're here for.
They say life is what you make it. So what happens if you actually try? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually tried to get your mind right? What if you actually tried to live the high life? What if you happen to die cause life is finite? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? What if you actually grind out when the time's right? What if you actually blinded by your hindsight? What if you actually find out what defines life? What if you actually tried to live your best day ever? I'm getting 1% better every day. I'm getting 1% better every way. I'm waking up every day to a sunny day. No matter what the weather say, life is like a record, so just let it play.